Hello everyone, welcome to my tutorial for this month. We're going to look at weather effects in Blender. I've pulled up some reference and wanted to figure out what we can do. Would be fun to rebuild, would be fun to explore. So I isolated a few different scenarios that I think would be really cool to build. And it's basically going to be about fog, it's going to be about rain and snow. To create lots of very moody images. We're going to look at how we can generate clouds and also look at smoke effects. And we're going to use quite a variety of different techniques this time around. We're going to look at what Blender can give us out of the box, so without using any other things like image textures. So we're going to look at our procedural stuff again. We're going to look at particles. Displacements, modifiers, smoke, simulations, and all sorts of things. But I don't want to necessarily be limited by those tools, as cool as they are, but I want to kind of combine them with what we, as concept artists, maybe would consider more like traditional tools, like 2D tools. We're going to look at image planes, we're going to look at using image textures again to see how we can leverage all these different tools and get the best possible result, because that's really what should count, rather than some kind of purist look at, okay, I can only use procedural tools, kind of like what we did last time. But let's see how we can combine these things creatively to create better images. So let's go. First scene. Like in the last tutorial, I'm going to do 3 different scenes to explore different aspects of our weather effects here. As usual, I start with a plane and a scale model. And since it's going to be bad weather, she has an umbrella now. So let's see what we need to do. First, I'm going to build a material for my ground plane. So if you watched my last tutorial, you're going to be familiar with this. I'm going to use some sort of like displacement to generate some sort of unevenness in my ground plane. I already made a new material for it, so I made a new plane here, gave it a material, named it. This one I don't need right now, but I need some. I need it to be a bit bigger, and I also need to have the visibility a bit further. Oh, sorry, that's in the camera view. Let me see, where's my camera? Because I'm already in camera view, so numpad 0 changes you in and out of the camera. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. The camera settings, oh yeah, the clip is 100 meters, that's not enough. Just add a little bit, so now we can really see really far. So I'm gonna scale my plane maybe like this. Control A to reset the scale. I need some more geometry, because right now it's really just one polygon. So hit tab to go into edit mode, right click, subdivide, 40 I think is fine. So you see now we have some geometry. Hit tab again. And then let's add our subdivision modifier, subdivision surface modifier. Let's give it a little bit of subdivisions to play with. People who saw my last tutorial will be familiar with this. I discussed it at length here, at that tutorial, so I'm not going to go over every detail here. I'm quickly going to set it up. If you want more detail, please check out my procedural landscape tutorial, where I go over this in a lot greater detail with different examples. Let me see. Oh, I need to change the cycles. We want to have GPU experimental feature set. Also a note, I'm using 2.81, the latest beta. I highly recommend you use it. There's a lot of little things that are fantastic, little changes, and of course one of the biggest improvements that I'm going to use later in this tutorial is the Denoiser, the Intel Open Image Denoiser, which will come in really handy. So you please make sure that you use 2.81. Either replace your current installation of 2.8 or install an extra installation and to test it out. It's really good. So we have a big plane subdivided, and we also need to go into our material here and under settings activate displacement only, so we actually get some displacement. Let's go up here. I can actually go out of the camera, excuse me, out of the camera for now. Sorry, I have a bit of a cold. Okay, we'll need that later, but for now we need the displacement. Plug that in, and we can already change to our mode here. Activate our cycles, preview image. Not much to see right now. Oh, now that I think of it, we need to activate our world light here. I'm gonna just use a sky texture. Let's plug that one in to color, and now we have our light here. Lady with the umbrella. It's just a transparent shader here. Don't worry about it too much. And for the umbrella, there's nothing special here. So right now we don't have anything, but let's go now into our object, into our ground plane, and see what we can do here. Also note, I activated the Node Wrangler add-on. It's an install that's already in there. You just need to search for Node Wrangler and add activated here if it's not already activated. It gives you some shortcuts to deal with nodes. Now I need to add a noise texture to actually modify our plane here. It needs some coordinates to work with. So since Node Wrangler is installed, press Ctrl T, and then I change the mapping to object. So let's see, why is there nothing showing up? Oh, there's something showing up. It's just very small. You can see here. And I think the lighting is a bit difficult to see right now, but it's okay. We're not going to do much. We see all these displacements here, but we need to adjust our settings a little bit. And I also want to achieve a very specific kind of effect here. So I want to have more like big wavy kind of displacements. A bit more detail here. And I want to kind of stretch it in one direction, so I get these long streaks of unevenness that you maybe would find more at like a beach or something. So now you can see here, I'm getting these long stretchiness here. But that is not enough. You need our usual color ramp to play around with the black and white values that the noise texture generates for us. Because I don't want to have this kind of crazy displacement here. I just want to have a little bit. So I'm cutting out some of the values. You can see here it becomes a bit more. It takes out a lot of the displacement. So you see large planes here where I cut off the black. And I also want to take the displacement way down. So yeah, so now we see we have a very subtle effect of these like streakiness, and that will not only help us to give us some variety in terms of the elevation, which is very, very subtle, but I'm gonna use it mainly to influence the roughness, so the reflectivity of our plane. So the way I can do that is via the roughness, of course, here. But in order to use the noise texture and color ramp to influence it, I need to set up a mix RGB. So the roughness can be controlled from black to white, with black meaning like 0, meaning high reflectivity, very sharp reflections, and white meaning almost very, very blurry reflections, almost no reflections. So I can set that up via this shader here, and let's see, we can do that. I want to not necessarily map it the same way, so I'm Shift-D, duplicating the mapping node, and I don't want to necessarily have it also the same streakiness, but have it slightly different. Oh, excuse me, that one is for a different up map. For this one, I can of course use the same one here because that's why I made it in the first place. So we can actually plug that in here. Nothing much is going to change because it just mixes the same kind of values. We can also try to let's see what happens if I plug that in here. Oh, okay, we're already getting something interesting here. So we're already getting somewhat the effect that I wanted to get, but it's a bit too reflective right now. Maybe we don't even need the mix shader. But let me try to take the same noise texture, but duplicate our color ramp and play around with that, because this basically already mixes black and white in a certain way. So maybe we don't need our mix RGB, and maybe we could play around with this. Oh yeah, okay, it already gives us the desired result. So now you see that these parts here are not reflective, and these parts here in the middle, the darker parts, are already reflective. And with how close I position these two sliders together, I can control how the transition between the reflectiveness and the non-reflective parts is. So if it's wider, it's a more gradual transition. If it's closer together, it's sharper. And you can also change the mode to like something like constant, and then it's going to be like a completely hard edge, but that's not what we want. For us, I think linear is totally fine. So we don't actually need this guy. The less nodes, the better, the easier this will work. So I want to kind of get that like beach feel, like some part of it is wet. I don't necessarily need to rebuild how the real thing looks. I just want to kind of create the effect. So if I know my camera angle is kind of like this, we're already kind of getting there. But maybe it's too wet in general. So what I can actually do is like invert it to flip these values. So I'll plug that in. So now we actually have less reflective parts, and we can change however we want that to look. So now we can play around with the look of it. So you can see how the patterns change. You can play with the inversion. So however you feel like you want it to have. So here you see that this is maybe a bit more with the sand maybe being dried up, so it gives you not as sharp reflections. So you can really play around with it and create something that you really like. Okay, this is pretty cool. Maybe this will kind of fit our purpose here. Make sure we save that. So now I wanted to add some additional fidelity, and I'm going to do that two ways. One is going to be a bump map. So we have, I'm going to duplicate our mapping because I don't want to have that streaky mapping, but I want to have a regular square mapping. Okay, and I'm also going to copy my noise texture here. But instead of having these big wavy kind of shapes, I want to have lots of little shapes because it's just like a secondary detail texture on top of it. So I copy these, Shift D as usual. I want to have a bump texture, plug it into the normal, and then connect this one with the height. And now you see there's like lots of little things here. It's almost fun. Maybe up the strength a bit. Maybe it's a bit too much. It just should just give like a little bit of like a secondary kind of texture. Maybe we don't need it. Maybe it adds too much noise and we want to actually dial it way down. Maybe. Yeah, that's not bad. Okay. And then the other way I want to add something here is through an image texture. Like I said in the beginning, it's all good to like try to do everything procedurally, but I think the real power lies in combining all these things together. Because we get the best of both worlds, basically, right? So I'm gonna not this one. Okay, let's get this. This took like a random dirt texture, and it needs some coordinates as well. Control T. We don't actually have an UV map here or anything, so I'm just gonna put that on, and we need to see if that will work. I think we need to change the the settings here, but I think it's, yeah, okay. I choose usually type texture, and then I control the size of it. Seems still to be a bit on the large side. Maybe 0.0, maybe 3. Yeah, so I get a bit of dirt here. So yeah, I think this is already quite okay. So get a combination of different things. Maybe the size of this one could be a bit bigger. I don't want it to necessarily look like, let me see. Just makes it a lot smaller, which is not what I want. So we need to actually go the opposite direction. Maybe 0.1. Still, maybe it's still too strong, the bump. I don't want this like cheesy bump effect. I just want to have something very, very subtle. So now you see we're just getting a little bit of distortions here in the reflection, but we don't actually change the average surface here that much. I just want it to be like a very subtle effect. And she's actually hovering over the thing, so let's move it down a little bit. Now she stands properly on it, I think. Cool. Okay, so we have that plane now, and I mean from above it doesn't look like much, but if we actually looking at it from this angle, it kind of gets there, and the background is going to be, or where the plane hits the ground, is going to be fogged out, so it doesn't matter that much if it's like not perfect. And now we actually need some. I want to have like a little mountain range in the background. Of course, we can get by a model and import something or whatever, or spend 5 hours sculpting something in ZBrush, or we can just quickly procedurally generate ourselves a little mountain range. Again, this I covered this at length in the last tutorial, procedural landscapes, so I'm just gonna quickly build one here. I'm just gonna use that same plane, Shift D, move it over a little bit, so that when I'm looking at here, I kind of have the mountain range in the background. Or like here, I don't know, like this. So of course I just duplicated it, so I'm still referring to the same shader. I need to actually have the plane selected and go into my shader settings and actually make a new one. Give it a name. And of course I need to activate our viewport so we see what we're doing. So basically we're starting again from the beginning, but we're gonna have this done pretty quickly. So again, we need a displacement. Oops, plug that in. Don't forget to activate displacement in our settings, otherwise it's not gonna work. We need our trusty noise again. Coordinates. Plug it in the height. And something's already happening. So we need to, this time, you can play around with the texture coordinates. If you plug it into generated UV or object, it's going to give you a slightly different look. Use whatever you feel like, whatever gives you the right results. You can just play around with it. To play with the scale and detail mainly, but of course we're not gonna, again, you can probably see something but not much, but we need to play around with the scale because we want to have mountains. It needs to be a bit bigger. So you see now that we pumped it up to scale of 15, we can actually see some mountains pop up. We quickly change the material a bit darker so we can actually see in the viewport here a bit better what's going on. Make it a bit shinier as well so we can really see. You see there's like a little landscape happening, but it doesn't really look like what I want. I want to have a few hills or a few like very steep looking mountains. So again, we are going to influence that by using a color ramp, modifying our black and white values. Again, I'm going to just quickly map this out to whatever I feel like looks best. So now we have this one, doesn't look very good. Let me adjust the mid-level so it doesn't move this down. So good, I have a few islands here, but it doesn't quite look like what I want. So let's play around with it a bit more. Okay, this one gets me something steeper. Maybe to move this a bit further to the left. So again, you need to play around with it. Excuse me. You can also, now that you have some stuff poking out, the way you influence of like moving this stuff left and right is by playing around with the location. Moving this stuff around will give you different kind of results. So you see that moving these sliders around will generate you an endless amount of things. So really the possibilities here are endless, and you just need to play around and find something that you like. Okay, this one is totally fine. Maybe I want to rotate this so I have the stuff in the background, move it down. The intersection here I don't really care about, because again my shot is planned in a way that I'm gonna look at it like this. It's maybe a bit too steep. Maybe we can take this down a notch, maybe to 12. Yeah, that's fine. So I kind of like rough layout of my shot is going to be like this, right? So it doesn't really matter what it looks like where the mountains hit the ground or this area in the back. Again, it's going to be all fogged out. So yeah, so now I have kind of like my my setup here. I actually also wanted to like throw in a boat or something, like some kind of stranded boat, just for added interest. So we can just I have one. You can just like choose any model, anything you can find, or whatever you feel like you want to put in there. Oh, that's big. Okay, the scale here is way crazy. Okay. Of course I have to scale it according to the character or to whatever looks good. Oh, come on. We are getting there. Why is my mouse a bit crazy right now? So we're getting there. Where's my character? Excuse me. So I put the ship where I wanted to have it. Doesn't matter, just rotate a little bit, scale. Okay, and so to the next step. And you're probably going to wonder, so when are we going to start actually like doing any weather effects? Well, to be honest, we already started doing that, because half of the illusion of selling like any kind of weather here is going to be in tying everything together, right? So once it rains, the ground is going to get wet, water starts to pool and puddles here and there, and we need to consider all of that. Or like having props like things like umbrellas that people use when it rains, or like what the person is wearing, like a jacket or whatever. It's gonna be part of selling it, of selling that idea that it's raining, that it's snowing or whatever. So make sure that you consider these kind of things. So the wet floor is going to be already part of it's going to be part of that illusion. So let's actually have it rain. Let's have it like add like a little bit of fog. So the way I add fog to this scene is not as a global kind of effect, but as a making a new cube, scale it up, make it wider here. So now I want to have it encompass most of this. Maybe I don't want to have it necessarily encompass the lady, but because then it's going to be easier for her to like stand out against the fog. And I don't want to have the fog necessarily like I want to have the fog only more on the ground. So I want it to be mainly here. And then I need a new volume medium, so I'm just going to call this post fog. I don't need the BSDF, I just need a principal volume. and I plug that into the volume. Don't forget that. You need to go into the volume, not the surface. So we'll plug that here, and it's going to be really, really dark because the density is at 1, which is crazy dense fog. You see it's really thick, and we can't see our ship anymore, our mountains. So we need to go way down to something like this. And let me focus my camera on her so I can I can rotate around her. Okay, so now we have a bit of fog here. It's currently pretty unlit, so don't worry about that. So make it a bit lighter maybe. Move it around a little bit if it's too much here, but that kind of gets us started. Let's make sure we save, and now you can see how all these things here blend together, and it doesn't really matter where these edges meet. And as the next thing, I want to actually start doing my rain. So the way I do that is I'm going to show you maybe 2 different ways on how to create like rain and snow particles. The first is going to be via image planes. So let me select a plane mesh, and where's a plane? Okay. And I'm going to scale that up a bit, make it wider, and then flip it vertically like this. And then I'm gonna, that's standing here, I'm gonna turn off the fog volume for now. What you also want to do here is, it's gonna be really handy, is gonna turn these toggles on and off. You want to have this disable and render. It's very, very useful that later when we render, we're gonna have to turn certain things on and off. And you have to have that toggle here. It's easier. So we have this plane, but for now this plane doesn't really do anything. It's just a plane, we can't do anything. So let's add a new material, rain. And we also don't need this one anymore. So now what we do is we need to create some sort of transparent shader. So we look for transparent, and there's one. Let's plug that in. Oh, it's transparent. So now we can see through, but there's still no rain on there. So the kind of setup we have to do is actually that we basically have to mix the transparency shader with a regular kind of diffuse color, and then use a mask to cut out basically rain particles. That's just how I do it, that's how it works. Maybe there's other ways on how you can do it, so please let me know. But this works pretty well, and we don't even need any image texture or anything. We can create everything here in the shader tree. So we need a mix shader for that. I'll plug that in here. It's kind of like, now it's like semi-transparent. For now we can use a diffuse. We don't need anything like a principled or anything for now. So we plug that in here. And now it's like halfway between transparent and white. Right? So now we need to define our mask, and you guessed right, we're going to use a noise texture for that. We're going to plug that in our factor here, and you can already see there's something happening here. So basically now we're telling it, use the noise texture to mix these 2 colors together, these 2 shaders together. And yes, we need coordinates. It shows it like this. Again, you can play around with it however you get the best result. And I mean, this doesn't look like rain, right? We need a lot more detail, a lot more noisiness. Don't forget to click on it when you scaled it in object mode and press Ctrl A, reset rotation and scale. And now we have, can you see it? Yeah, you can basically see we have like a really noisy, grainy overlay here. So how can we turn this into actual rain? And you guessed right, again, it's the same thing again, color ramp. The same, this kind of, this setup gives us a lot of different applications. So now we need to play around with this and see. I mean, you can play again. You can see whatever gives you the nicest kind of rain. So now I need to. And we can't really see anything. And why is that? So basically, I'm manipulating our values here again. And right now I have dots, but I want to have streaks. So I need to actually change my settings here to make these longer. So I elongate them in the Z direction, which is up. And that gives us this like really streaky look. Maybe I want to have it even more streaky. Let's try 20. Okay, now that looks a lot more like it. So now I can just play with our mask to get exactly that look that we want. The problem is, as you can see, it's kind of like grayish, which is okay, right? It's not like the rain is white, right? It's like raindrops, right? So you can leave it like that. If we can also do something, if we want to get a bit more contrast, if we want to like show the rain a bit better, we can also use an emission texture instead of that, and then we plug that in instead of the diffuse, and then maybe tone it down a notch. That's a bit harsh. And then we can also play around with the color to get it a bit more fitting. So now we basically have like a layer. Right now it's a layer of rain. You can see it stops kind of here. We can actually, I mean, rain is rarely like always straight down. So we can actually rotate it a little bit. So now we have rain at an angle by using here the rotation. And so that looks pretty cool already. That's pretty convincing. Yes, you can do this in Photoshop. Yes, you can. But we can now, we can get, I think, for me, when I do these things, yes, you can do this in Photoshop. But not everybody has Photoshop. But what this allows us to do is that we can use the rain and we can use the fog and we can use clouds and everything as an additional compositional medium. That we wouldn't make the same decisions that if we do this like as a post-production step. So by having these reflections, by knowing exactly where the fog is and where the where occlusion is and everything, is going to help us to make different design choices, different creative choices. So in order for this not to look like it's just going to rain like in a plane in front of her, we can go to the modifier tab and add an array modifier. We quickly switch here, and we want to have, let's see, is that the, where'd it go? Is the right selected? Yes, I should. I want to have constant offset. Wait, in which direction are we? We are in X. Okay, you can see now we added one more, maybe 3 meter, and then count. We want to add a few more. Let's add maybe 10. Let's see what that looks like. Let's update our shaders. Let's save. now we see it now, we're adding really heavy rain here. And of course you can influence how heavy it's going to rain by adding more planes. Maybe we need to stretch this out a bit more. Yeah, that was too much. But you can also see there's suddenly a dark plane like in the background. So that is actually something we have to check here, and it's in our transparency. In our transparency max bounces in the render settings. And right now it's set to 8, which basically means, excuse me, that it more or less like passes through 8 transparent objects and then it stops. But we have 10, so we need to actually up this one more time, or even 2 more times, and then we're actually seeing through all planes. But there's still some artifacts that we get here, which is not so nice. So we need to, let's maybe bring it down to make the effect less visible. And maybe we want to actually, we'll play around with this, right? So maybe we can bring one in front of her. And it depends on where you have your camera set up and what kind of shot you're going to use. So let's go into the camera here. What kind of setting have you? 50mm, I don't want like 20. Let's focus on her. And then we can play with our camera, right? We can activate our fog. And slowly we're getting something where we can say, okay, now the weather has become really shitty. Now we're getting like the rain really close to our camera, which is quite interesting. Maybe it's, of course there's such a thing as like it getting too much. We want to also, what we can do, because the rain seems to throw like some weird patterns, we can go to our modifier and change some of the offsets here to throw this off a little bit. So yeah, that is the rain. So now we actually want to, what else can we add here? Oh yeah, I wanted to add some kind of backdrop, and I don't want to use it necessarily as an HDRI. I want to use it maybe for my reflections. And again, this is something like, oh, you can do that in Photoshop. You can replace your image and replace your background in Photoshop. But like, fair enough. But it's actually easier to do in Blender, because we are also going to get the reflections for free and everything. So for that you need to actually, again, it's something built in. Maybe in the new version it's already activated, but it's this import images as planes, which is super cool. So let's say Shift A, and it's, where is it? Now I define it. Where is it? Here, image is plane, and then it wants you to select an image. I have it of course prepared, and I want this image. Again, you can use whatever like cloudscape background you have. I like these, and now we need to scale it up. Where did it go? So here it actually prepared everything for you. So we want to, again, scale it up, and it's our background, right? So let's activate, see how it looks. Am I still on my camera? Okay. So I have my framing here. Just leave it like that. Where's my character? So it's a bit too far, and it's not big enough. So I select it, and I wanted to like basically fill out the back of my frame. But you see, it's very, very dark. I have that nice banding to help me like separate my foreground from the background. And now I need to start playing around with the settings because it's becoming too dense, everything, right? So maybe we want to bring down our fog. Maybe we want to play around with our rain. Maybe there's too many things going on, too much rain. And because I have, with the color in full control, I can actually, this is basically an indicator of how heavy it's gonna rain. Maybe we'll want to have our camera a bit tighter. And now we can do one thing with our backdrop, is we can actually plug that color into the emission. And that will really kind of bring this whole image alive. Because of course it's the sun, right? So we can actually, it should give light into the image. And scale it down a bit, move it around a bit. So if this was like my framing, right? So I want to just frame it just like, so it fits. And now I'm getting this like light band, like actually separating my background, or separating the mountains from the background. And now it becomes all more readable. And now we get all these like crazy cool reflections in here, which would be really, really difficult to do if you want to do it in Photoshop later on. It would just be way too much time. And the cool thing now is as well, like if you want to now like animate this, this is actually flipped. I realized there's like the the ground on the almost there's the ground in the sky. That's weird, but yeah, it's funky. Okay, now it makes way more sense, right? Maybe it's not mirrored, but it doesn't matter. It still looks cool. So yes, now we have a really cool rainy image, and yeah, because now we have everything in Blender, we can animate these shots. You can animate the rain by just using the parameters here. By using the parameters here, you can change the location a little bit, have it like go down a little bit, and then you can actually animate the rain. You can animate your camera. You can have a dolly shot or whatever, and everything is already in Blender. So that's really, really cool, and that's the benefit over doing it in Photoshop. So you see the setup is pretty simple. It's really pretty simple here. One thing I wanted to show you as well though is we turn off some of these things because they're just in the way now in the viewfinder, in the viewport here, is if you want to do stuff like isolating objects, or if you want to have even more localized, interesting looking fog, we can actually use something very cool and very easy to do in Blender. I'll add a new plane I'll have that here. You don't really need to do anything with the plane. I'm going to actually put it slightly below the surface. So we have that plane here, have it selected, go to Object, Quick Effects, and say Quick Smoke, which will make a new cube here, which is called the smoke domain. You still have your plane. Where is it? Oh, no, not that plane, this plane here. You can name these accordingly, probably won't make sense. And if you go to the physics properties here, you will see that this automatically applied a couple of settings, which is here the flow type. It has smoke activated, type flow, which just means like this is the emitter of the smoke. And it added this new smoke domain, which is the domain. It basically means within this cube, the smoke is gonna be generated. So you can change that to have bigger smoke. And if you take a quick look on how this looks like, you can just add like a new thing here, if you drag here, you can add a new window, and we want the timeline. And we don't want to have it run so much. I just wanted to run like, I don't know, 60 frames, which is like 2 seconds. And then it's a bit slow on the Mac, so bear with me, but you can see now that it actually, if you drag the timeline or if you play it, you see that now there's actually smoke generated, right? You can let it run for 250 frames if you want to get more interesting patterns. So that by itself is already pretty cool. But I want to edit that a little bit. So one thing I like to use is, there's many settings, most of which we don't really need. But clicking on here, you have the smoke color, so you can make it more white or whatever you want. But I want to change the vorticity to the max. Let me see, what is the max? 4, which will add a bit more. We have to reset the timeline, and then you have to wait until it's generated. It's pretty fast on Windows, so which will add a bit more like curliness to it. But it's still like, it just goes up, which is not what we want. We want like turbulence, we want that it looks more like real smoke. And the easiest way to do that is by actually just adding something called a force field. And we need just, like it says here, wind. So right now there's wind blowing, but it's blowing up. And we can, by pulling this one, we can change the strength. So you see that these rings here now go further away from each other. It means as the wind is stronger. You can also set that setting here, strength is now 47. And then the direction, we want to have it blow like maybe behind her. Whoops. And then we can move that here, maybe like a bit further down, like this. Excuse me. And now let's see what happens. Reset. And now you see that it blows the smoke like behind her. So now I'm kind of using that smoke as like a way to like add something behind her and to like have her like be separated from the background. And you can do that for like the ship or whatever. So we can add that over there at the ship, so that there's like smoke around the ship or whatever. You can even set this one, like you can set her as you can set it to smoke and then say collision. So if we like move her in here and reset, we can see that it actually will not affect her. But for the purposes, I mean that's for like simulations and stuff, and it's not really necessary. I think it looks better and more natural if it really encompasses her everywhere, right? We don't have to really care about like collision and all that kind of stuff. So we can just get rid of that. It looks more natural if it just engulfs her completely or is behind her completely. That looks nicer. So reset it and let it generate a little bit. It's really fast on Windows, it's just a bit slow on Mac for whatever reason. And then you set it to whatever looks nice here, and save. And then if we play it, if we set this up, you can see that we actually have like this like really cool looking smoke plume here, and we also have a density setting. I think we need to regenerate that maybe. I don't want to have it so thick. You see it's like very like slight, like we can't really see it now. It's very, it's like in the background, maybe we need to up it a little bit. Just like this. Oh, it's still pretty thick, but you can, here, we actually have all these settings here in the smoke domain in the shader editor here, and then, yeah, here, okay. I think that's better. This density is more like affecting the simulation. This density here is affecting the look of our fog. So we can play around with that. And again, you can make this very subtle. You can play with the force fields. You can have multiple wind directions. You can, I mean, this is basically just there to like help us maybe isolate certain objects. So to have like, I mean, if you want to have fire, you can also add like fire to it. You know, you have like a flame setting and all these kind of things. So it's really, really cool to add all these things. And if you set it up properly within your camera view, then you can have really cool, like isolated pieces of fog and smoke and this kind of stuff. And there you have it. So we pretty much have our first scene with all these different elements. So we can move on to the next one. Okay, so on to the next one. Just a quick thing about the new stuff in Blender 2.81. So now you actually here in the outliner here, in the scene selection, you can actually press, you can hold Shift and you can select multiple objects. So you can press Control to select single objects and add them to your selection. That was previously not possible. So now you can hold Shift, select them all, press M, we'll add a new collection called this Coast, and say OK, and now everything is in the collection Coast. I like to like clean up my scenes and everything like that. And then we can also duplicate a few objects that I want to bring over into my next scene. So I want to bring the girl with the umbrella, the plane, and maybe the camera over, excuse me, into my next scene. And I can say object, you can see here duplicate, press escape to not move them. With everything selected here, I can press M again, say forest, not foresty, forest. Okay, and now I have these objects here in my new selection. I don't need the coast anymore, but I have a good head start right away, right? So I can already get started on a new one. Here I want to show you some different things. Oh yeah, one thing you should make sure is that you change the material here, because if it copies the object and the material is linked to. So if we make any changes here, you would also change the other scene, which we don't want. So I call this forest ground, so we can start a new material here, and leave the other one alone. For the rest, it's of course cool. So I want to build like a foresty, a snowy forest scene. Let's see. We start with the ground like the last time. Here I want to show you maybe like something a bit different. How we can. It has already the subdivision modifier, which is great. But I want to add like I just want to show you different ways of creating like ground deformations and without really sculpting anything. So I want to use the modifier here under this like wrench tab. So we already have a subdivision modifier applied. So now we want to do a displacement. It's a different kind of displacement to the shader displacement. Modifiers work in a way that they're all non-destructive and they are applied one after the other. So this one here first, subdivision, then the displacement. So you see that already something has happened, that the plane kind of got lifted up a little bit. You can influence that by the mid-level here. So maybe we want to have it here so that she stands on it. And then we want to add like a displacement, and we can do that by saying new, and then we click on this little tab here, show texture and texture tab. So we go here, and now here you can choose an image, you can choose a movie even, or we can get our good old procedural stuff going and we add a distorted noise. That's a bit too much. I want just to have like a bit of an uneven like forest ground. So I'm adding something like this here. So we have a bit of unevenness, but not too much. And then the good thing is that we can actually stack these. So, excuse me. The same way that we kind of approach our shader displacement in different levels with like bigger bumps and smaller details, the same way we can do it here. So once we've done this, there's nothing stopping us from adding another displacement. So let's just do the same thing again. Now we have another displacement, and we can do the same again, say new, and now we can change it again. Now, right now it's the same as the previous one. But it just, because it just apparently copies it from what it has existing already. So now we can choose something different, like let's add like a Voronoi, so we get like different kind of shapes going. Maybe change the kind of feel we have here. That's maybe a bit much, so we can go back here and play with the strength. That doesn't look bad, but now she's floating, so maybe we want to probably need to make some adjustments later on. Oh, that's also pretty cool. Then maybe we'll just do another one. We'll see what that does. Same thing again. The new settings. It copies the one from the last time, but we can change it again. Again, we would maybe change the strength of it. So, and now we actually have change the height so she stands on it. So the good thing about these kind of things is that they're maybe a bit more limited in the terms of like kind of shapes you can achieve, but these work in Eevee as well, and that's really cool. So now, okay, we have our distorted plane. So it's kind of like, I mean, it doesn't, from up here it looks like weirdo things, but when you're like this, when you stand like this, I mean, it looks totally fine. And now we actually want to add some textures to it. I'm going to use image textures for this. Let's activate that. And I want to maybe like mix two shaders together. Oops. And I don't need to be shiny. The forest floor is not going to be shiny. There's going to be like, we're going to put like snow on top of it. And we'll see. So let's say image texture, coordinates we need. And let's plug that in here. Open up what I've already prepared. So maybe we want to have like, it's actually a tree bark picture I'm going to use for that. And I mean, why not? Why not? And I'm actually gonna I'm gonna add a vector transform to play with the to have more control over the coordinates. It actually converts the object coordinates into world coordinates. I did that for one of my previous tutorials. I explained how that works, but so basically now we have this. I want this to be spectral, but I guess that doesn't matter really. There's no influence. Oh, we need to mix it, of course. That's why it looks so weird. Confused there for a moment. Okay, I want to copy these both so I have control over the mapping as well. Control D. Plug that in here, plug that in here, and now we actually need to change the texture to something different, and I want to have a bit of grass peeking through here. And now through the mix shader, it kind of puts like the grass where it's where the other image is darker because of the mix. I can also, what happens if I mix it darker? Is there any it doesn't really make a difference, so you can play around with it. It's kind of like the, you know, like the the shaders from like Photoshop. Sorry, not the shaders, the adjustment layers. You can play around with a blend maybe here. Doesn't really do anything, doesn't matter. This is going to be covered by snow for, at least in the foreground. This is just kind of to give us a little bit of variety here and there. I mean, by itself it doesn't look like anything, to be honest. It doesn't look like anything at all. But it doesn't matter. We're going to add fog, we're going to add snow. I just want to have a bit of unevenness in the forest floor. So now we have this guy. And let's add some trees to it. Again, this is about weather, right? But of course we need to set up our scene, and I thought maybe just like I show you how to set up the entire scene. The trees are really, I mean, I'm not gonna give them much love, to be honest. Once we've done the trees, then we can get right into like all our snowiness. So let's add a cylinder. Move it up, move it to the side. Excuse me, we're gonna the trunk a bit less big. Make it taller. We just need to, I'm not gonna model anything up there. I just want it to be tall enough to be outside of the picture, make it a bit smaller. You press Command R and then you just use your scroll wheel to see how many subdivisions you want to add, and there we have it. There we have it. Press Escape to not move them. And now we actually want to play around with like let's add a little bit of variety to this guy. I want to make sure I select the faces. A little bit. Oops. Trunk a little bit bigger. And then yeah, if you press B, you can have this rectangle. And then I mean, I really don't care right now. I just move these things a little bit here and there, because I just want to have a little bit of irregularity. Maybe there's an easier way to do this. Maybe you can like quickly sculpt this kind of stuff. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's a way to procedurally grow trees. I have no idea. Maybe somebody can tell me. You can also activate the transparency wireframe and the transparency mode here, and then when you do this, well, you have to of course press tab. It will select everything through. Whereas when you don't have that activated, then it will not select everything. It will only select everything that faces your camera. So now we just have a little bit of irregularity, that's fine. And we want to make sure we select this, we give it a material, call it tree. And we're gonna add also just like an image texture there. And I have like a really awesome shitty tree bark texture I'm gonna throw on there. And that's all I believe I'm gonna do with that. And I don't do UVs, so maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't, I don't know. Let's put this in here, and we'll take a look in a second if that works. And now we need to just duplicate these trees around a little bit. So you can move them, you can like make them a bit bigger, rotate them, so there's just variety, and that doesn't all look it's like cloned or anything. Maybe there's a automated way to like do this. I always want to use like, I don't know, some kind of, I wish there was some kind of array modifier that allows you to add like some kind of jitter to it, some kind of random like distribution. I'm kind of used to that from like Modo. But maybe there isn't, maybe there is, I do not know. So I'm like stupid, I do all this by hand to get my variety like that. And then I just take these guys and it used to work that I press Ctrl J to join. How come it doesn't work anymore? Did they change that? Don't tell me they changed that. Oh, Command J, how come it doesn't work? Okay, I need to do it in the viewport. Apparently I can't do it here, that's weird. Anyway, I'll join them, and then I continue duplicating it. Until I have like somewhat okay looking forest. I don't want to have it too regular, too random, right? Okay, we're almost done. Maybe one more time. Let's click next to where I'm supposed to click. Make sure I don't intersect my lady here with a tree trunk. Okay, that's fine. Okay, now I have my trees. Let's put them in the collection. Good thing is I can drag and drop now pieces, objects into a collection. That was also way overdue. Okay, so now if you go here, you see now, okay, wow, we have fantastic real forest. So let's continue the work actually. As the next thing, we can adjust the texture for the trees in a second, it doesn't really matter. One thing I like to do now is actually we're gonna do two types of snow. We're gonna do one snow that is actually one snow that like the snowflakes falling, and we're gonna do snow on the ground as an extra geometry layer. So let's do the snow right now, and I add a new cube, scale it up, and I want to have it like encompass like my entire scene. It's maybe a bit much. Let's see what's going on here. So now I have this thing in mind here. Okay, and I'm gonna call this forest snow. Yeah, forest fog. This is gonna be like a duplicate, like it's gonna serve two purposes. It's gonna be my fog, and it's gonna also be the place where my snow particles will be spread out in. So let's have a look how that will work. Let's have a look how that will work. This will be, again, the volume setup is the same as before. I just add like a principal volume into the volume shader. But now I actually want to add like a particle system. So we have the cube selected, and it needs to go on my collection. Click and drag. And the particle system is here. So not just particle properties. I'm gonna press plus here. And I want there's a few settings you need to consider, just learn about, and you have to click from emitter to hair. Click advanced so we get some more control. Now we have this emission thing here. We're gonna play around with the number of them in a second. But most of this stuff you can kind of ignore. We want to have rotation, where we can play around with the rotation of these objects, or more like the randomness of it. And we have to go to the render tab. The rest you can kind of forget about. We want to actually render an object. And we want to spread around an object within the space of this cube. We don't have an object yet, but we can make ourselves one quickly by pressing this. You can use anything. You can use like a cube, a circle. You can use like an icosphere, and make it a bit more low resolution, because we're gonna use a lot of them. I'm going to move that thing here so we can take a look at it. And then we're going to go back to our cube. Oh, I want to move this in here as well. Here, let's go cube here. And now we can actually pick our object. We use the eyedropper, and now I can't see it anymore, of course, stupid. So I'll click this, and now we see we have these things here, but they're all stuck on the outside, and that's not what we want. So we need to actually check our, we need to check the source here. Right now it's emitting from the faces. That's not what we want. We want to emit from the volume. And so now you see everything moved into the volume here. It's a bit big, right? It's very big. But so we're gonna scale them down, right? And 0.01 is already quite okay. 0.01, yeah, let's leave that. Let's randomize them as well. And let's randomize the... Oh no, actually, sorry, this is not the right randomize IP. We need to randomize the scale, so we get a bit more variety in terms of the scale. And we also want to play with the rotation. So now you see we have all these little things, and you see that 1000 of these is really not enough for this kind of big space. So let's let me see if you can. I need to see one up close so I can actually see if I'm randomizing the rotation here correctly. But for now it's fine. Okay, let's let's up the number maybe to something like 30,000. Yeah, okay, now we're talking. So now we actually have a lot of them here. But they look like little balls, and I mean, snowflakes don't really look like little balls. So we can actually now go back to the sphere itself and play around a little bit with the shape of it. Maybe we can get it more snowflake-like. So let's go back to this guy. Let's play with the modifier so we don't need to like actually sculpt anything. If you have a scan of like a snowflake, by all means go for it if it's not too high poly. I'm just gonna use my displacement magic here, and let's add some kind of distorted noise again. That looks really cool already. We can actually leave it as it is. Maybe we can just actually squeeze it a little bit. Let's see, and that's like a really abstract snowflake, but why not? It probably looks better than that thing we had before. Now they're all like a bit flat here on the. No, a bit flat. Can we change that? Here, okay. Now we can change the orientation axis a little bit, and then it feels a bit more natural. So now we have all these like exploded little things, but I think once we're actually in render, it's gonna look totally fine. Now we actually have one more thing that we need to consider about these snowflakes, is that the material. But I think I'm gonna we can actually use a similar trick that we used before with the rain, which is just try to play around with it, maybe give it an emission so it becomes actually visible. So we'll build an emission shader quickly, which doesn't take long at all, and we'll dial that down, and we'll check in a second how that will look like. Because we still have, let's have a look. we need to test our setup here, because we have the trees now, we have a volume, and we have snowflakes. It should be fairly dark since we don't really have any source of light right now. We have all these little snowflakes, and I think they're quite successful in how they look. This is maybe a bit strong. Let's add it to 0.03. Okay. Deselect everything. So yeah, I think that's already kind of getting into the direction that I want it to be. But I want it to be, honestly, a bit more creepy. And one trick I used during my setup that I tried is that I'm actually increasing the fogginess, but I'm gonna be adding a massive light source coming from one direction. So I'm gonna add an area light. A really big one. Oh no, not that big. Gonna put that kind of like here, opposite side of our camera, and then I'm gonna just like crank it up like crazy. In my test, I got kind of like to 200,000, made it a bit bluish, and I upped the density of the fog volume. So because I want to have a really creepy kind of dark forest, let's see what that does. Okay, still fairly dark. Then I need to probably, let me see, where's my light source? Did I place it correctly? But I kind of get this creepy, slowly, this creepiness here. Oh, pressed it wrong. So yeah, there's like really heavy fog. I think one thing I did is that I actually moved the character in the foreground out of the select it anymore. Okay, I moved the character out of the scene, so I have more contrast in the foreground of the scene. Let's see how that looks like. Oh, but then she's not going to be in this. So yeah, so there's another thing we can do, which is actually whereas we can split up the fog volume and the particle volume. So she can have like snow all around her, but the fog, we have more control over the fog basically, right? So we can actually set the density to 0, and then we don't have any fog in here. And then we'll add another fog volume cube. We can actually move. Sometimes there's like a weird bug in Blender where I suddenly can't select anything anymore. Maybe you guys know what this is about? And these two need to go in the forest. So this one needs a new one. We call it forest. Fog 2, very bad naming, but we add a principal volume. set it to something low, add it to the volume, a bit lighter. Okay. So now we should have a bit more control. Let's see what that does. So yeah, now we have our trees look a bit shitty. There's something still wrong here. I think again, reset. No, that doesn't. Okay, let's see. I have to set this one to box, I think. Yay. And now I have a really terrible texture, but it's okay, I'm gonna paint on top of that. The fog volume is still way too thick. The fog volume is a bit too thick. Let's see. We need to dial that in. That doesn't really give me the right feeling I want. Maybe like 0.08. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, so now we have the fog, we have the snowflakes. What is cool is we can add some kind of we can add like a spotlight to it to highlight certain areas that we want. Let's add a spotlight. It's like here, hit it at an angle, and we need to up the power for that one as well, just so it's a bit more visible. Testing it was like about 100,000. That was actually good, and I want to have it kind of like, I want to have it to be like, I don't know, kind of like fake moonlight, like some cinematic kind of thing. I want it to be like a tighter cone, and I want to play around with the blend factor. So basically how soft the gradation from light to no light is. And again, you can play around with that however you want. Let's see where this light hits. You can see we have like this light cone here. And you can also see what's happening, that our machine is getting slower and slower. But you can see we're getting more control over the scene now. We can have that light here in the back. We can even make that a lot stronger. We can have it also maybe a bit bluish. So we can direct it exactly where it's gonna hit. But so we have the snowiness and the fogginess, and we have our creepy forest, but we have no snow on the ground, which will help tremendously to sell this scene. So that's what we really need to do next. And we can use some interesting technique again, instead of like, because the ground is like procedurally deformed. So how are we gonna add snow to it that conforms to the ground, and it doesn't take us like ages to build. So the way we can do that is we add a simple cube, and it's pretty neat. I was snapping on, I must have pressed some keys here. Selecting doesn't work anymore, that's really weird. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We're gonna, well, now we have a problem. Okay, let me check this out. So a restart did it, so now I can select my faces again, which is nice. So I made a cube, give it a material, call it snow. It's white, great. We'll take care of that in a second. And let's make some snow. So I'm just gonna select this, take it down, make like a layer of snow here. So stretches out a little bit. I don't know, extrude here. I know the selection doesn't work anymore. Oh no, it kind of does work. I want to have like a general area of like snow. I must have clicked something again. Really not in the best shape today. Sorry about that. So let's extrude a few more parts. I don't know. Let's maybe select this edge. Bevel it. Do this, and that's cool. That's already more than I need. So we have this blob of whatever it is here, and it doesn't look like much right now. Do this as well, I don't know. Not really that important. So we have this, and now we want this to be our snow. And let's see how we can do that. So I'm going to do this by a couple of modifiers. Let's go in here. First of all, I want, well, snow doesn't look blocky, right? So let's make the snow a bit smoother by applying a subdivision modifier. Let's amp up the subdivisions for render and viewport. And you see, it's like already a lot smoother. So that looks good. Next step, I want to dynamically or whatever procedurally apply the snow to the surface below so that it conforms to it without me having to do anything. And I can do that via the shrink wrap modifier. I can choose a target. I use my eyedropper and choose the plane. And poof, and it's pretty flat, which is not so good. But I can play a little bit. We can try to play with the offset. And you see it lifts the plane up a little bit, but it's still very flat. So I don't want that. We can also choose a different mode here, but then a lot of times it just goes haywire. So you see it doesn't really work. But can have on surface, inside. There's many different options you can play around with. Can say maybe above surface. All doesn't really do what we want to do, but another way to more reliably do it is by applying displacement again. So we have done that before, so you know how that works now. So it looks scary, crazy right now. But let's have a quick look how we can maybe achieve a smoother look. So we again go new, click on here, and choose our distorted noise. I played around with it again. You can figure out your own settings. I chose whatever looked good, which is these settings here that I found. It looks still pretty messy, but we can fix that. Let's get back to our modifier and dial down the strength a bit. Again, I played around with it. You can choose other settings that maybe work better for you. Oh, not 0.0, sorry. 0.68. And again, you can choose whatever you want. These settings are more like not random, but again, they can they have different. You can use different settings, and it's totally fine. Again, resetting location and scale, rotation and scale and everything will help. So never forget that, especially when you, like me, and you just scale objects in object mode and in edit mode, and you don't really care. Always hitting that Control A and resetting everything. Resetting the scale is really, really useful. So now it looks like crap, but we have our good old subdivision modifier, and so we'll do it one more time and up these subdivisions to something. Here we need to be careful. We need to look at our poly count, because this can get out of control really quickly if you subdivide these meshes multiple times. So now we actually have something very interesting looking, and we can still play around with some of these settings. You see, some of these are becoming quite gnarly. There's a lot of different, too much detail, which I don't want. But this doesn't look too bad. So it's kind of like, you see how the snow kind of sometimes lets through some of the surface below, and here it looks like some of the snow broke off, and then you can duplicate this, rotate it, and scale it however you want. So, for example, we have this one here, and if you go like Shift D, now it's gonna be a bit laggy, of course, because all these modifiers are being applied to it. So let's rotate it a bit. Maybe let's scale it a bit. So if we now hit Tab again to get out of it, you see that it just applies the snow, the geometry to the ground right away. And so you can see you don't really have to have any modeling skills at all, and we can still get an interesting looking snow. I mean, of course it's not going to hold up like super close up, right? But I think it looks pretty good. And now what we do is we actually add a material to it. And with this material, so it's white, so that's a good start. If you look at snow, the roughness is pretty high because it's made out of, well, all the snowflakes, right? So there should not be any crazy reflectivity, right? I mean, you can build your own snow shader. Maybe you've seen another snow shader built somewhere. But let's make our own. And nothing stops us from adding another displacement on top. So we can use this, or we can even use like a bump map as a additional surface detail, right? So we can add another displacement, but we can choose quite a subtle displacement. So which means, like, if you remember what we did before, that goes in height. If we set the scale quite low, we get big wavy kind of things, big chunks. If we set the scale really, really high, then we get smaller displacements. So again, I played around with it so that it kind of looks good. If I can grab this, then it would work as well. And a very, very subtle scale, 0.02. Let's see how that looks like. We'll turn it on. Save, don't forget to save. The 2.81 is very stable, but it does crash here and there. Especially if we're adding more and more and more things. So now, of course, if you look at it as a whole, like, it looks stupid because there's like two slabs of snow applied to the surface here. And it doesn't look like much, right? But I mean, if we again set our camera Let's select our lady as usual and focus on her. You do that by pressing numpad the dot, and then it focuses on her, or on whatever you select. But if we actually choose an angle like this, and then, or if we actually will rotate a bit, then we see where our scene falls apart. But if we have this as a foreground element, then it's not too bad at all. So what we can do then is we can quickly, because our camera is here, we should maybe put this behind her, so it makes more sense, because on the side here nobody sees it. It's selected. Let's maybe collapse the stack here and what is that? Render modifier. Okay, we get rid of it right for now, so I don't have to deal with the lag here. So let's see. Let's put it here. Let's maybe make it even bigger. You can totally scale it up here. We're not adding any geometry. It's all flat. You can engulf the tree. That doesn't matter because the target is the thing down here, and then we'll turn them on one after another. We'll turn off. Let's see how it looks now. Or we can also, we actually haven't, here's our camera. So we're still in the right camera, that's good. You can select different cameras. You see the one for the coast is actually the camera 001 now. So in this scene view, if you list like little primitives here, you can choose through which camera you look right now. So let me change it here. So the camera from our coast scene is still there. We don't touch that, and we're gonna leave the camera here because we want to have a look at our scene here. So save it, press camera, press activate the viewport. One thing I forgot to mention is that for the snow texture, you want to set, maybe try setting the subsurface to 1 and changing the subsurface radius to 0.3 in all 3 categories here. I think that makes the snow look a lot nicer. Okay, so you see we're getting there, right? So we have snow, we have snow particles, we have fog, we have some like eerie light. So now you can just imagine putting, I don't know, some kind of creepy creature, something she finds, a castle, whatever. You can put whatever here, and you can really build yourself a really nice scene. And you can add whatever you want. So I mean, another thing we can do is, and you have that beautiful snow here and endless possibilities. And what we can also do is, what I did for the scene is, okay, let's take this guy. Let's actually just duplicate the snow. Sorry, 1 second. Let's duplicate it. Oh, I shouldn't have moved it, but it doesn't matter. Again, we'll turn all these quickly off so we don't have to do that. I just want one of them. Get rid of that one, delete faces. So I have this one now. And of course, this lady has been standing there for a while, right? And she's been standing there and waiting, and nobody's coming. And she holds very, very still, so the snow piles up on her umbrella. So once we take our shrink wrap and we actually say don't target it on the plane, but target it on the umbrella cover, and puff. Has maybe a tad thick. Let's dial down the, oh, sorry, 0.2. Yes. So you see now she has like a little layer of snow on her umbrella, and it took us like 2 seconds to do this instead of like sculpting something or whatever. Let's have the last look at the scene, and then I think this one is done, and we can actually move her into the snow. And then I mean, yeah, you can get way deeper into this. You can actually paint like a displacement map, or you can paint like a map that we can use for displacement, so you can have like her footsteps in there, and you can take this like way further. But oh, I don't have this kind of patience. So I'm trying to get this to as close as possible to something really good for a paint over as I can within the time frame. And maybe I'll get to, like, I don't know, paint my own weight maps or whatever, if I figure out how that works in an efficient manner. But I kind of want to use the procedural tools and all these neat tools that Blender can offer to make this kind of scenery really quickly. And then, I mean, if you use like real tree models for this, I mean, it's gonna look amazing really quickly. And now you see that we can actually zoom in here a little bit on the snow. You can see that the displacement shader actually added quite a bit of like additional surface detail that looks like, I don't know, like little places where the snow broke in, or like little animals were like running across it or whatever. So you can achieve quite an interesting look really quickly. And then you just paint over it a little bit, and then you're done basically. And yeah, you can apply this to anything now. You can apply this to any surface with like a slight modification here where the snow is like thicker and thinner. So it's pretty cool, I think. Yeah, okay, so this scene is kind of done, and we can, I mean, the particles are actually still a bit low. Oh, which cube was it here? This one. So maybe we'll up it to 50,000. And you see there's no problem at all. It doesn't really impact our render times. Sorry, I just pressed something probably here. Did I think I just changed something. Because suddenly my snow is either tiny or gone. Let me undo this. Okay, it's back again. I don't know what I pressed. Anyway, you see there's a lot going on now. And again, you can, I pressed tab, and for some reason, okay, yeah, of course. With Alt A, you can unselect everything, so it's nicer to look at. And I mean, you can refine this. You can add like maybe like you can make nicer snowflakes or whatever. And you can animate them however you want. Endless possibilities here. And it doesn't have to be snow. It can be like, you can turn this into rain. You can change these snow particles into, because you can instance any object, anything you can really use. And you can make this into a cityscape, right? It doesn't have to be trees. You can apply the snow to your house geometry. So you can, I don't know, have your Merry Christmas whatever scene. Yeah. So let's set up the last scene. I want to leverage as much as I can from my previous scene. So I'm going to choose the camera, the volume, the background image, the character with the umbrella, and also the ground plane, and duplicate them and move them into a new collection. Call that clouds. Okay, get rid of the coast, so we have duplicates for everything. I want to change a few items, of course. Maybe make this one a bit larger. Oops. Larger. I also want to make sure that I'm changing the name of this one, so I can copy that one, but I need to change the material, so I make sure I don't change my other scene. Let's do this one. I have a tiny bit of fog in this one. I think I want to make sure that my clouds are the star of the scene, or like the kind of, because I mean these scenes I'm doing here for this kind of stuff are always there to show the kind of effect I'm trying to teach you guys, not necessarily because it's the coolest scene ever. So for this one I'm thinking, since the cloudscape is supposed to be the most the best, or the thing that is supposed to be shown off here, I want to make sure that the scene adequately shows that. So I want to keep the ground fairly simple. I probably want to make it very reflective as well. So all the focus is on the clouds and the reflection of the clouds. And let me get rid of the cube. And so for this one, let's move that one here. Okay, maybe make it even a bit bigger. So let's see. This one will take a modified version of this coastal mountain range. Again, copy paste. I need to make a new one, and we call it clouds. Let's call it ground. Copy paste that in here, and we're going to modify that a little bit. And we have the backdrop here. We need to also change that. Copy paste that as well. Call it clouds background. I copied the wrong one. But it doesn't matter. I can just quickly do that. I prepared a different image for that as well. Use this one here. I kind of want to have the mood to be like how do I say, like the cloudscape after the rain. So it kind of fits into our it fits into our theme of like weather. So now it's like the scenery after the weather. Just want to make sure I get everything right. Okay, it doesn't matter. So kind of the feeling like after the rain, and I mean she's still standing there with her umbrella, but now it's kind of like over. Okay, I don't think there's an alpha, but it doesn't matter. So that's the kind of the feeling of like the sky's clearing up and there's going to be light coming in, and it looks like happy and all. So let's see, let's get rid of this one for now and adjust our mountainscape, that little bit of mountainscape that we have. And of course, I forgot to turn on displacement. Always keep forgetting that. Boom, turn on here in the mountains. Okay, these mountains look fine. I don't necessarily care too much about that right now. She is standing up to her hip in water. Of course, that's not nice. So we need to lower it down a little bit. Now she's floating. She's probably standing on the shore, and the shore has like it's pretty wet. The ground is pretty wet. So what I want to do here is now play around a little bit with. See that which camera is the camera 001 is that now? Oh, I screwed up the other camera, but that's fine. So we have this one now. Let's set a pretty wide angle for this one, so I can see a lot of the clouds, like a really wide angle. And we also, of course, need to really scale that guy up. Oh, I scaled it the wrong way. I flipped it accidentally. Can we stretch it a bit? Might look better. Starting to see a bit of the background, but it's fine. Where did the lady go? Is she behind us? Yeah, there she is. So we probably need to maybe widen this thing a little bit, but that's okay. So let's do something with this plane here, and it's already interesting, but we can do a bit more. We can get rid of the glossiness here. So basically, what I want to do now is that I'm going to use this shader here, this noise texture, which kind of the noise texture here helps us to divide the areas between the mountains and the flat areas. So basically everything that's black is like the ground, and everything that is not black is these mountains here, however small or big they are. So we can use that demarcation line to drive our roughness. So we can use a mix RGB, plug that into our roughness, and roughness is basically black to white. Black is completely rough, completely smooth, very reflective, and white is completely rough, like completely non-reflective. So right now it's in the middle, 50, and we basically need to change one end to black and the other one to white, so that we can tell this here, this noise texture, this demarcation line, to choose to switch between reflective and non-reflective, because I want everything flat to be water and everything mountainous to be some kind of stone that is non-reflective. So once we use this in our factor, you can see now that our ground here, our mountain here, up here is non-reflective, but closer to the ground it becomes a bit more reflective. Maybe that makes sense because it's a bit more wet, or we can also do a different color ramp, duplicate it, plug it in here. So something that is similar, but we maybe move these closer together. So now you see that all the glossiness out of the mountains is gone, but we keep the same like general pointers here. So now that we have that, we can also, depending on how black you make this, you can have it really, really reflective, or you can add a bit of blurriness to it. Maybe there's some like waviness, or it's drying up, and it's not like super clear, super crazy reflective, depending on how we want that. And I can also now add within the same shader a texture to the mountains. So let's do that. We can use the same split here, the same split that the noise texture gives us, because the ground here doesn't need really anything. It doesn't need anything. So we can plug this one. Let me see, wait, we need to plug this into the white one. That's where we want it. This one we want completely black. We don't want any shader attached there. Of course, now it's pink, because that's what it does when it doesn't find any image. So let's have this like completely generic like rock surface, and we need some coordinates. As usual, I'll put my vector transform for world coordinates in here, and then we want to adjust it a little bit. I mean, in this distance it's already more than fine. Maybe that's fine, that's a bit better. And now we have a little bit of a texture in our mountain range. I also experimented with adding a sunlight in here. Oh, now a folder, that's interesting. I experimented with adding a light in here, a sunlight, to maybe brighten the whole thing up a little bit more. A bit of an overcast bluish tone. We'll see if we need that. We might want to use that with the clouds together to give it a bit of a lighting. So I had to quickly switch to a Windows machine because clouds are a bit tricky. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to make a new cube, scale it up a bit, put it like somewhere up there, and reset the scale, give it a new material, get rid of that, and add, as usual, our principal volume. So, but of course, this would just mean that it will give us a foggy kind of thing. So I'm going to actually switch to for that to EV. Two reasons for that. So actually, Windows, Mac cannot show. No, sorry. First thing is that these clouds. Oh, see, I did a mistake here. Clouds are basically volumes with a noise shader attached, which makes them incredibly hard to compute, and they take a lot of processing power, and which means the preview in cycles is going to be very, very slow unless you have I don't know, 10 graphic cards in your, or 4 graphic cards, or whatever, 2080 whatever Ti in your machine chugging away. Then maybe it's getting a bit more responsive. But if just average guy with not too many GPUs, maybe 1 or 2, then this is gonna be a bit harder to compute. So we can jump to EV because EV can actually display that. The quality is not that fantastic for a final render, but you can figure out the all over shape and distribution of the clouds and everything, and then you can just like render it out in cycles. Main issue is that Mac for some reason has a known bug that it cannot show the noise attached to the volume shader. It just doesn't work. So I had to switch to Windows for that. So we can figure it out, and then we're going to jump over to Mac again. But it doesn't really matter. Most of you guys are probably on Windows anyway, so you can do it right here in Eevee. So we have our principal volume. So let's do it. Yeah. So we have our principal volume here, and you can see we have a foggy thing. But of course here let's not forget the displacements are not working in Eevee, the shader displacement, so it looks a bit weird, but don't worry about that. We're just here to figure out the look of the clouds. So by default, it just looks like a foggy cube, but we actually need to do a couple of things to it. So we're going to plug whatever noise generator we're building into the density that we have here. So there's many different ways ways of how people are doing it online. I've watched so much material on them, and I'm just going to show you one of them. You can infinitely change them. You can also purchase people who build like special shaders for it. But if you want to build your own, this is one way you can do it, and you can experiment with it and go crazy and build nebula and do whatever you want with it. So we're going to start off with Musgrave texture for the main big shapes. We're going to give it coordinates. Generated is fine. And then let's see what that gives us. Plug the factor into the density. Because something is happening, right? You can see here. And then we can play around with these. You will see that in 2.81 there's actually a 1, 2, 3, 4D option as well, but we'll leave that alone for now. We can play around with this. We can play around with these settings to achieve whatever look we want. Playing around, and then you can figure out whatever works best for you. So one thing, if it's hard to see what's going on, what you can do is you can add just a light here quickly, so you can see what's going on. We need to up the strength a bit, I think. So we can see how the volume reacts to the light. See what happens if we place it inside. This is for testing purposes. Maybe we need to make let's make the world a bit darker, so we can really see what's going on with our clouds here. This is all just for testing purposes. Okay, so we have this one now, and you know what's coming. Color ramping, everything. And then we play around with this one. You can also invert this. This will be beneficial later on. So we're getting quite some little hard edges here and there. Let's see if, okay. And now we actually want to mix that with some other stuff. You can see how taking the scale down will actually result in these bigger chunks here. We can then, of course, scale it up. And you can see we're getting like some interesting shapes here, which kind of can serve as our main shapes here for our clouds. And then, like we did usually, we are adding smaller noise modifiers on top of it to generate a cloud look to it. So let's leave that for now. And we're going to actually now mix this as usual with our mix RGB and mix a noise texture into it. So we'll put that in here. Of course, it will change now a little bit because it's mixing it with a different color. You can try out all of these. There's many different ways of mixing these colors. A harsher mix will, in this case, like a color burn or whatever, will or multiply will have a bigger effect on it. And we can also have a strong influence on the shape of it by adding a math node and by basically multiplying the texture by itself. And right now it's actually already too much multiplied. So let's set it to 0, but that can, oh sorry, it's set to add, but we want to set it to multiply. So right now it's multiplied by 0 and it doesn't do anything. So let's set it to 0.5 and we're already getting a somewhat denser cloud. And then we can set it to 5 and you can see how it really solidifies. That can be helpful in working out the look of our clouds if you want to have something more abstract, not abstract, but like maybe something more stylized, right? It doesn't have to be always real looking. It can also be like stylized clouds, and with this multiplier effect we can achieve that. I mean, we can just try out what happens if you put it in 50. Yeah, it's becoming really, really hard edge, and then you can actually create some really interesting structures with this one. Swiss cheese, for example. To type in the right. Okay, so let's stick to 0.5 for now. So let's get back to our mixing. We want to mix in a noise texture. Good old noise texture, plug that in. Let's get our coordinates here. We can also, do stuff like elongate our flatten our, raise up our clouds so we get something more like in terms of height. Get something a bit thicker. Let's see. As usual with our noise texture, we want something noisy and grainy, like we have done so many times before. And let's see if we bring that into here, what will that yield? So you see we're adding the noise on top of the Musgrave. Could play around with here because we just want to have a little bit. But we're getting something interesting here. Let's see, maybe we can add a bit more to it. So let's more randomness to it, more definition, because it still doesn't really look like clouds, but let's bring in more noise, and we can do that again via a via another mix. Which we can actually plug in here. So compute for a second, and we also bring that. We want to bring that in here, so we can mix two different kinds of noises. We can mix a bigger noise with a smaller noise. And we, I tried these here and there to figure out like what would look nicest. So can play around with it. So again, you can also play around with it. Playing around with these settings here, you see that we can get something closer to cloud looking. Now we need to find a way to separate these kind of choppiness here. But we're getting some of the bigger pieces, and then we get the noisy smaller pieces. But we basically want to have a bit of control over everything. So let's try to, we have this one here. And one thing I saw online, which a lot of people did, is actually add something that is called separate X, Y, and Z. So we can get more control over certain axes. And for that purpose, they, for some reason, it helps. I don't know how the math works in this one. But if we add another mix RGB and mix these two together here, it helps to separate the, because right now, like, everything cuts off where the cube stops. But through this separate XYZ, we can actually, because Z is our up and down axis, we cannot have these things terminate, and we can do that via for somehow the linear light works really nice. Just had to find the right slider. So like you can see here now, we have a setup to generate ourselves some clouds. And I didn't really add anything else. I added this add node here, which will help us to dial in how much these clouds break up. So if you can see how we use the slider here, it becomes more solid or more broken up, introducing more of the noise or less of the noise. This one really doesn't change much the things at all. This one here, like I said before, solidifies the clouds or makes them more soft. This one can, with this one we can break up the sky a bit more, or we can make it more dense. With this one here, the scale, we can make the clouds smaller or we can make them larger. Which also means that you can animate these values and create moving cloudscapes, which is pretty cool if you have enough processing power. So we can play around with all these values here. Mainly the ones here, the scale of the Musgrave texture is going to be important. Also this one here, the linear light will create more or less breakup, as you can see here. But you can play around with most of these. You can see how it generates more smaller shapes depending on where we push this. So you can play around with this and generate the kind of cloudscape you want. You can of course also introduce different kinds of nodes. To introduce different looks to your cloudscape, right? It doesn't always have to be like super real. It can be abstracted. You can see how it really changes different kinds of clouds. The main thing is that you have good reference and you emulate the kind of cloudscape that you really want to have. Or if you would do like an alien world, then you can of course do anything you want. You can see how if I change the noise here, how it changes the cloudscape. So the cool thing with Eevee is that you really can interactively figure out how this cloudscape looks like. And however, the final look doesn't really look that interesting, to be honest, in Eevee. So that's why we want to probably go to. That's why we want to go to cycles to render the final out. So you see that now with this setup, the bottom and top is not cut off anymore, which is great if you want to do shots above, like, I don't know, castle in the sky or whatever, or from below. It will really help the look of it. Left and right are X and Y axis. It doesn't really matter too much because we won't see the edges here, at least not for this. So yeah, I'll play around with the settings a bit more, and then I'm going to be back on the Mac to see if we can do like a final render, and then I can also move on to the last topic. So now I brought the file back into the Mac, played around with the settings, and ended up with this kind of cloudscape. You can see that it looks, I think, a lot better in cycles, these kind of volumes, but it is very, very slow. So on my 1080 Ti, it takes really long for the viewport to resolve, and it takes quite a bit of time to actually render a scene out. So of course that begs the question, is this feasible for the results, or should you just paint it in Photoshop? Well, I think it's yes and no is kind of the answer. I think it can help in compose very interesting shots. Of course, Eevee can help a lot with that, figuring out the placement and the distribution of the clouds, and then you render out the final, which can still be fairly fast. If you have a lot of graphic card, then of course it's going to be a lot faster. Or if you have, let's say, like a CPU with a lot of cores, then you can get really good results out of it. According to some friends who did some tests, the volumetrics render a lot better on a CPU. Of course it takes a bit longer, but if you have like a Threadripper or whatever, 32 cores, then it will also go reasonably fast. Now the difference between the background clouds and the foreground clouds, right, which is kind of like, I guess the main thing is that in certain shots, like in this really wide angle shot, the volumetric clouds can give like a really immersive kind of feeling to the scene, because of course they are in perspective, right? And either you can leave them like that, or you can use them as a base for paintover. But I think it gives you a really great indicator into the perspective that the clouds follow. And you can add them in a smaller scale to, I don't know, like add like mysterious fog around, I don't know, a castle on a mountain or whatever. It doesn't have to be necessarily be a cloudscape that this technique is used for, right? So the good thing is that this is not only useful for clouds, it can be used for nebula, it can be used for certain localized fog. This can even be, you can plug this into any volume. So you can even plug it into your smoke volume if you have like the smoke we generated for the previous scene for the coast. You can plug a simple noise shader into the volume, and you get a broken up, more interesting looking smoke, for example. So there are actually endless possibilities. You can make really funky stuff. You can add it as a ground floor for your castle above the skies, and it's not limited by any means to the image you see here. You can really generate anything out of that. So that's the fun part. So that's it for this scene. It's kind of how I left it. I added a bit of fog to it. It will take a while to update here if I add the fog as well, just to make the scene a bit more moody. Let's beach ball for a second here. And let's hope nothing craps out. And of course I made a mistake. Where did it go? I put it in the surface. That's why I told you before, don't put it in the surface, because it will all go black. There you go, and now it slowly updates again. But it will. I use that for the final image that I'm going to show you in a second, and it just helps to tie everything a little bit together. So yeah, let's move on to now the final part that will kind of help deal with these noisy volumes that also will generate a lot of, well, noise in the image. So let's have a look at how we can fix that. So now I want to talk a little bit about the new denoiser in Blender 2.81, the Intel Open Image Denoiser. The previous denoising option in Blender wasn't that good, to be honest. And I think it was activated here by this tab down here in the passes, in the layer properties, the denoising here. And I mean, don't turn that on. It's not very good. But of course, you see the image is noisy. We need some kind of denoising to help us with the render times. Otherwise, you're going to have to up the samples a lot, and that's going to take a lot of time. But you have this new one here in 2.81, denoising data. You need to activate that. You can also activate mist if you want to add some Z depth to it. So that's the only thing really you need to click on. And now we can actually go into rendering our image. Let me up the resolution a bit so we can see it better at the example. So we have that. We can see it's going to be a noisy image. There's a lot of volumes here. Actually, one thing I wanted to show you before we hit render is for this setup, I wanted to add a bit of depth of field to have the foreground a bit blurred out. So we select the camera and go into the camera tools, activate depth of field, use the eyedropper, and here you can see it shows me which object I'm on. Let's choose the umbrella, and now let's use a really short f-stop, like maybe 1.4, and I want to blur out the foreground and a bit of the background. I want to have the focus on the lady here. Maybe 1.4 is too fast. It's set 2. This kind of stuff you can basically read up about because it has to do with camera technology. But basically a lower number in the f-stop will produce a shallower depth of field, will throw more things out of focus. I think that is fine for the purposes here. So you see that the focus on the lady and the foreground and the background is a bit blurry. And now let's render. So now we have our render, and you see if you zoom in, it's pretty grainy. It was 128 samples, so not very much. It took 3 minutes to render for a 4K frame, which is not bad, but we can do better. So now what we actually need to do, because the denoiser is not by default like part of a pass or anything, you can't like select it here, it's not in here. What we actually have to do is a little extra step, which is well worth it. So we actually need to go to compositing. So if you're like me, you never opened the compositor before. It's pretty scary, you don't know what to do, but it's actually very easy because most of the stuff we don't need, we just want the denoising stuff. So click on here, use nodes, and you zoom out. So now we have this one here. What we want to do first is maybe add a viewer. So just like in anywhere in Blender, Shift A will give you the new interface, and then you just search for it. So we can, for example, use the noisy image node and plug it into the image. And this will call up the image in the background here. And you see it's noisy because it says noisy image. But now that we activated all the denoising data to be included in the render, and you do need to do that before you start the render. Afterwards, then you will not have these nodes here these inputs, these outputs to use, which give the best result. So now what we want to do is we want to have the denoising data. Press denoise. We have 3 inputs. We want the noisy image in the image. We want the denoising normal in the normal, and we want the denoising albedo in the albedo. So now we have that. So what do we do with it, right? So we need to actually put it into the composite node. So we use that and we plug it into the image, and nothing happens. Well, it's working here, it's compositing, which is good. And now something happened. But for some reason it's a bit weird to actually activate it, to actually see it and get it out. So we can use this one now to plug it into the viewer. And you can see here the progress, and it's done. So, and now you saw in the background, we can't actually zoom, we just see it here in the background, but it cleared up like significantly, we can see that. So how do we get the image out now? Let's go get away from this dope sheet. We want to go to the image editor. It's just the way it is, you have to do that. But now we can click on this image thing here. We go down, we click on render result. And now we have our beautiful denoised image here. And if you look at it, it's really, really clean. It's almost too clean. Now look, our snow looks almost fake. Probably want to tweak these breakups in here later on. But we have now a super clean instant image. So now we can say image, save image as. And now this changed also to the composite. So you go to view layer, which is your noisy image. You can see here the noisy image, and you go to choose here composite, and it's crazily denoised. So it's almost too denoised. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to show you a second in Photoshop, just kind of like create like a hybrid version of it, because it's actually creepily clean, and that's not always what I want. But yeah, and then you have the composite here, and the good thing is that this setup in this file is now done. So the next time you actually render a different shot, let's say we want to render out our cloud shot, this is already done, because the next time it will feed the render in here and do the denoising and bring it to the composite, and then it's going to be available here right away. So you don't need to go through this ever again for this file. If you have a different file, you need to do it again. But for here, this denoising setup is done. So for all the other shots I want to do, I don't need to actually go through the extra step again. So I'll play around with the shots and create everything I need for my final images, and then I'll see you in Photoshop. So as we're going towards the end, I just wanted to show you quickly how we're going to save out all these different passes we need. So you see here I created like 2 images for each set. So you can see the clouds, and I save usually like a ID pass and a mist pass out. So the mist pass I showed you, you have to activate it here in the layer if you want to have that in the layer properties, and then in the render setting, in the render window here, you're gonna have under view layer, you can say mist. So you get this layer, and then you say image, save as. As for the ID pass, it's always a bit tricky. I've shown it many times before, but of course, show it here again. So we have that. We are like in the normal viewport, and then click this arrow here, say flat, random, get rid of the outline, and also get rid of this one here. Just click on it and it's gonna be gone. Of course, we're gonna have all these volumes here. You wanna probably get rid of that so that we get more to choose from. And then we can say viewport render image save as, and then you just save it out. And you do that for all the images. You can change it back. So over here again. Just save that. Okay, so we have everything here. You can see, and I also saved out the denoised image, and I saved out the noisy image because I want to use both. So now let's see what that looks like. So this is, for example, one image which I ran out with the rain, the coast, the background, everything, the ship. And if you zoom in, so this is the denoised image. And then if I set the noisy image on 100%, you see all the noise in there. But I want to preserve some of that noise because I think it gives it somewhat of like an organic, more natural quality. The completely denoised one is too clean almost. So I just add the noisy layer on top and maybe set it to like 20%. And you can set that to whatever you like, however noisy you want your image to be. But I think for me 20% is quite good. And then again, this is not a Photoshop paintover tutorial. We do need to understand that, of course, the paintover can add a lot to it and need to push the image the last 10% to make it really good. Because this by itself is okay already, and we're trying to push it ever further in Blender to be more and more final, so that we can have more flexibility and add animations and do lots of other cool things that really can push the whole concept art thing forward, right? But for still images, we still need to add that bit of Photoshop. So here what I did is to add that piece here to have the shape of the ship read better. And then here I added the mist pass just to give some extra distance fog. Here's my ID layer. I don't need that. I can push that all the way up here. And then I will add a bit of fogging here and there to push. Actually, I'm not sure I actually added this in the final, the mist, sorry. Maybe I didn't need it. I wanted to occlude and I wanted to get rid of the 3D-ness of the image. That's always the goal number one. It should be looking like a natural photographic image and not like a 3D render, at least in my case. Maybe in your case it's different, but that's what I'm trying to achieve here. So I'm adding additional fogging, occluding certain areas and exaggerating other ones. So I'm adding here more of little clouds and then an empty layer where there's nothing on. And then I added some little rocks and pieces in the foreground and separated them out via like a bit of mistiness here. So I just wanted to add some foreground elements so it doesn't look so like fake 3D, the ground, just to break it up a little bit. Maybe some stones here and some reflectiveness and stones further away. And that's actually all I did for this image. And then as usual, I add my post production stack on here with lots of color lookup tables, vibrancy settings, and different kind of level adjustments, and also a bit of vignetting. So I usually do that because I like the color shift. It kind of brings everything together for me. You can look through these and adjust it to however you like, however strong you want to push your images. Now you can say the rain looks a bit fake. I think it's okay. You can of course play with the opacity and the emissions and get it to however you want. You could also probably experiment with rendering out the rain effect on a completely separate layer. Like only turn everything off and render the rain against maybe like a completely black background. and then you can comp it in later in Photoshop, so you have more control over it. So I did this additional shot. I chose a very different kind of lens for that. I think like 85 millimeter, to just get this great juxtaposition of the lady against the ship. Interesting shapes here. And here I pretty much did the same. Let's see. Yeah, so you can see I add the fog. Excuse me. The way I get to add the fog and not lose the rain is by using the blending options here. I mean, I think that's pretty common knowledge now that that I can that I can say please show everything that is under this layer and that's in this bright spectrum of the image, and then all the bright elements of the image below will bleed through. And then yeah, I do that again and again. Add some clouds here, add some little stones here. All these kind of things will add realism and help to bring the image together. Here I'm like selecting the image through my ID layer and just bring the silhouette out a bit more. And now I'm pushing her out a little bit more as well, and add some more reflections in the foreground here. Not much, I don't need much, but just so a little bit more that it sells the illusion better. And let's have a look at the forest. So again, very limited layers that I need here to really push this image a little bit. So here I added the mist pass. As usual, this one a 20% overlay, or 30% this time. And here I added just like a forest background and put it on screen so only the light parts bleed through. So I have a bit of the background here. So the background bleeds through and it gives the illusion that it's actually a forest. So I get rid of the sterility of these like straight tree trunks. You see here the snow has some interesting wobbles that I achieved just with like all the noise modifiers I showed you. There's a little bit of paint here to add some variety to the tree trunk and have a bit of snow creep up the tree trunk. These are all details that you just get by looking at the right reference. Some dirtiness in the snow, because it's not going to be like all clean, right? It's going to be like little twigs falling down and that kind of stuff. And then I added a little bit of like snow, like a different kind of snow falling down. Not only the white one, but some twigs and maybe some broken up snow on her umbrella. And that's again all for this one. Here where I chose a low angle shot with like a stronger depth of field, I need to make sure that in the paintover I take that into consideration as well. So broken up snow on her umbrella. Added the background and made sure that to blur the background to match the camera settings, and then same for the foreground elements. Added some details to the tree trunk, just add another photo, the dirt, the twigs, and another foreground element to really sell that distance, that depth. I probably could have fogged out her legs a bit more so she fits in where she stands, but I like the contrast, so it's fine. And then we have the final images, I have to say. So here actually there was like a bit cut off, but so just like warp it in, because that's where the image plane was finished, because it's quite a wide angle. I actually have, I have a different set here of adjustments. So here really, like I said before, I wanted to have that reflection of the clouds, and so here you can see the mix between the plate background and these volumetric noisy clouds that give it like this strong perspective feel. I added like a layer of like reflections and stones. So I just took a photo of like some coastal image. Add some more stones. Add fog in a certain area, and then just some foreground elements to break up that watery feel here, and just to have a little bit of like a breakup, and that pretty much sells I think the rest of the image. You don't need to repaint everything. Here I added some little cloudy things to obscure some of the background. So you don't need to repaint everything, you just need one area where you can give a bit of variation, and then the rest kind of falls into place. And here we have the last image again, something similar to the boat image where I chose like a longer lens and a lower angle. I could have probably added some element here. It would be cool to have like a castle, I don't know, something here. But we want to focus on the mountainous stuff. So I chose the mountains to be a bit lower to occlude some of the mountain. So you see that this is the image that comes out of Blender, which is pretty much all there. So you get that nice occlusion with the clouds, with the volumetric clouds. At the distance fog, some highlight reflections to guide the eye to a certain area. Some little paint strokes, a little rock here, a little wisp there. I'm just copy pasting from the previous images. Some more wispiness here, and just a little bit of separation between the character and the background. And that's all there is. So you see, we don't really need much to add. I mean, you can paint more clouds and you can do whatever you want, but I mean, I think it sells the image already without that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have for this time around. I hope this will be fun for a lot of people to play around with, and I think it should make a good companion piece and kind of a furthering of ideas of last month's tutorial, the procedural landscapes. So now you have like a semi-procedural weathering effects you can throw on your procedural landscapes, which should give people a lot more to play with and generate a lot more variety and a lot more possibility to do all sorts of different kind of landscape designs and different kinds of moods all in Blender. Okay, thank you again for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.